What if the very first gods were not just powerful beings to be worshipped, but the ultimate master builders, the original architects of everything we know? Picture the raw, swirling chaos before time began, a formless void without light, without order, without meaning. Then, from that emptiness, a consciousness emerges, and with it, a plan. A design, a vision for a universe. This is the startling truth hidden within the world's oldest stories, that our earliest deities were, at their core, divine architects. They didn't just command the elements, they measured, they shaped, they engineered reality itself into existence. From the vast, star-dusted heavens to the intricate workings of the human heart, these primordial creators were busy constructing a cosmos, attempting to build something enduring, something meaningful, something greater than themselves. Today, we're setting out on an extraordinary journey across time and culture, diving deep into the mythologies that have shaped human understanding for millennia. We'll travel from the dusty plains of Mesopotamia to the lush jungles of Mesoamerica, from the philosophical depths of ancient India to the heroic sagas of the Norse. In each tradition, we will uncover the profound and often overlooked role of the gods as builders. We'll explore the monumental projects they undertook, the careful construction of the cosmos from pure chaos, the establishment of sacred spaces that bridge heaven and earth, and even the deliberate design of humanity, crafted with a specific purpose in mind. These are not mere tales to explain the unknown. They are foundational blueprints, detailed plans left behind by the first architects, revealing a universal drive to impose order, beauty, and intention onto existence. By the end of our exploration, you will never look at mythology the same way again. You will see these ancient narratives for what they truly are, a reflection of our own deepest instincts to create, to build, and to find our place within a grand, designed universe. These stories resonate powerfully today, echoing in our skyscrapers, our scientific inquiries, and our endless search for meaning. They speak to a shared human spirit that looks at the stars and doesn't just see random points of light, but the handiwork of the first great builders. So get ready to see the divine not as distant rulers, but as the original visionaries whose monumental projects still inform our understanding of reality, creativity, and our own potential to shape the world. But what does it truly mean to call a god an architect? It's more than just a metaphor for creation. It implies a deliberate process of design, a blueprint, an intention behind the cosmos. Across the globe, from the very cradle of civilization, this archetype emerges not as a coincidence, but as a fundamental human understanding of how order came to be. In ancient Mesopotamia, the world's first recorded stories weren't about gods who simply willed things into being. They were about gods who labored. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, describes a cosmic battle where the god Marduk defeats the primordial sea goddess Tiamat. But his victory isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a construction project. He takes her divided body and physically builds with it, crafting the dome of the heavens from one half and the foundation of the earth from the other. He sets the stars in their courses like a foreman placing stones. He regulates the tides and the seasons, establishing the rules that govern this new structure. This is not a vague act of magic. It is a detailed, almost technical feat of cosmic engineering. This theme repeats itself in the sweltering heat of the Nile Valley. The Egyptian god Thoth stands apart as perhaps the purest example of a divine architect. He didn't fight a monster or birth the world. He conceived it intellectually. Mythology tells us that Thoth first envisioned every detail of creation in his heart, the home of thought and intention, and then brought it all into reality through the power of his spoken word, his tongue. He named things and they came to be. This is the ultimate act of architectural planning, a mental design made manifest through declaration, establishing a perfect, logical order known as mat. It's a profound concept that elevates the divine from a powerful being to a master designer, whose primary tools are intellect and language, and we see this same pattern an ocean away in the myths of the Maya. Their sacred text, the Popol Vuh, describes a council of creator gods, heart of sky and sovereign plumed serpent, who likewise attempt to bring order from the primordial void. Their process is one of trial and error, of drafting and revision. They first try to create beings who can praise them, crafting them from mud. When that fails, they try wood. It's only after these flawed prototypes that they finally discover the right material, maize, to successfully build humanity. This narrative frames creation not as a single, flawless event, but as an iterative design process, complete with prototypes, testing, and refinement. These gods are problem solvers, engineers working to perfect their ultimate creation. This universal impulse to envision our gods as builders speaks directly to a deep, innate human desire. We are a species that instinctively seeks patterns, that imposes structure on chaos, that builds shelters, communities, and complex societies. It is only natural that we would project this most fundamental aspect of ourselves onto the divine, imagining the cosmos itself as the greatest possible project, conceived by the greatest possible mind. By seeing gods as architects, ancient peoples were not just explaining where the world came from. They were validating their own drive to create, to organize, and to find meaning through construction. It set a divine precedent for human endeavor, suggesting that to build, whether a temple, a city, or a life, is to participate in a sacred act, echoing the very first work of the gods. This foundational concept of the deity as builder provides the essential lens through which we can now examine the specific, staggering projects these divine architects undertook. So if the gods were indeed the first architects, then their inaugural and most magnificent project was the construction site to end all construction sites, the entire cosmos. This wasn't about merely decorating a pre-existing space. It was about forging stability from pure, undiluted potential, about drafting the blueprints for reality itself. Across cultures, these creation myths share a stunning similarity. They almost always begin with a formless, watery, or empty void. The ancient Greeks called this initial state chaos, a yawning gap of nothingness. But from this nothingness, the first structures emerged. The earth goddess Gaia solidifies, becoming the foundational slab. Then comes Uranus, the starry sky, arching overhead as a magnificent dome. This is the fundamental act of architectural creation, establishing a firm foundation and a protective ceiling, defining the basic boundaries of existence. Later gods like Zeus would act as cosmic project managers, organizing this raw structure into a coherent system of seasons, weather, and celestial motion, ensuring the cosmic machine ran with precision. This theme of a meticulously planned universe is perhaps most profoundly expressed in Hindu philosophy. Here, the god Vishnu, resting on the coils of the endless serpent Ananta, dreams the universe into existence. This is architecture of the most metaphysical kind. The entire cosmos, with its countless galaxies, complex laws of physics, and swirling diversity of life, unfolds from a single divine thought. It is a vision made real, a plan executed not with hammer and chisel, but with consciousness itself. The concept of Leela, or divine play, suggests this immense construction is both a deliberate act of will and a joyful expression of creativity, underscoring the intentionality behind every atom and every star. This idea that the universe is a deliberate design, not a random accident, provided ancient humanity with something incredibly powerful, a model. If the cosmos itself was built according to a sacred, orderly blueprint, then human society should strive to reflect that same order. We can see this principle etched into the very stones of history. The layout of ancient cities often mirrored the perceived structure of the heavens. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia were massive, stair-step towers reaching for the sky, literally building a connection between the earthly realm and the divine architects above. They were attempts to bring that cosmic order down to earth, to make the sacred blueprint tangible. Similarly, temples from Egypt to Cambodia were designed as microcosms, small-scale models of the universe. Their inner sanctums represented the primordial mound of creation. Their pillars stood for the trees of a sacred grove or the pillars holding up the sky, and their ceilings were painted with constellations, directly mapping the heavens. Even the rituals performed within these spaces were often architectural in nature, designed to maintain the walls of reality and keep the lurking chaos at bay. By building in alignment with this perceived cosmic order, our ancestors weren't just constructing shelters, they were participating in a sacred continuity, reinforcing the divine architecture with every stone they laid, ensuring their world remained part of the grand, intended design. But having established the grand structure of the cosmos, the divine architects faced a new, more intimate challenge. Where would they themselves reside? If the universe was their masterpiece, they needed a headquarters, a control center that reflected their glory and power. This led to one of their most ambitious and inspiring projects, the construction of the heavenly realms. These were not merely divine suburbs, they were meticulously architected domains of pure idealism, built as perfect counterpoints to the messy, unpredictable world of mortals. They represent the ultimate gated community, but one whose design principles would echo through human history, shaping our highest aspirations for society, art, and the soul itself. Consider the Norse vision of Asgard, a breathtaking example of divine defensive architecture. This wasn't a wispy, ethereal paradise. It was a formidable fortress, a stronghold built to protect the Aesir gods from their ancient enemies, the giants. Its most famous feature, the shimmering rainbow bridge Bifrost, guarded by the watchful god Heimdall, was a marvel of engineering. It served as both a majestic gateway and a controlled access point, a literal and symbolic connection between the divine realm of Asgard and the human world of Midgard. This architectural choice reveals a profound truth about the Norse worldview. The divine was not entirely separate from the human, but it was fiercely protected, a bastion of order against the encroaching chaos represented by Jotunheim, the land of the giants. The very design of Asgard speaks of a universe where beauty and strength are intertwined, where harmony must be actively defended through brilliant design and constant vigilance. A world away, in Chinese mythology, we find a completely different but equally powerful architectural vision, the heavenly court of the Jade Emperor. This celestial domain is the epitome of bureaucratic and cosmic order. Imagine a vast palatial complex of unimaginable splendor, where every courtyard, hall, and garden operates with flawless, harmonious precision. This is not a realm of wild, untamed beauty, but one of impeccable structure and hierarchy. The Jade Emperor's palace is the central administration building for the entire universe, where celestial officials manage the stars, the seasons, and the fates of mortals according to strict, immutable laws. Here, architecture is a metaphor for perfect societal order, a divine mandate for how a civilization should function, with every being knowing its place and purpose, contributing to a serene and everlasting peace. It is the ultimate expression of the Confucian ideal projected onto the heavens themselves. These celestial realms, from the fortified walls of Asgard to the orderly courts of the Jade Emperor, were far more than just divine real estate. They functioned as symbolic blueprints, three-dimensional manifestos of what could be. They gave humanity a tangible vision of perfection to strive for. This pursuit of an ideal, a heavenly state of being, became a driving force in human culture. You can see its influence in the soaring Gothic cathedrals of medieval Europe, which were literally designed to recreate the glory of the heavenly Jerusalem on earth, using stone and stained glass to pull the worshipper's mind upward from the mundane to the divine. The intricate geometric patterns and vast domes of Islamic architecture seek to mirror the perfection and infinite complexity of Allah's creation, providing a physical space that hints at the harmony of paradise. This architectural inspiration even shaped how we plan our cities. The concept of the ideal city, from Plato's philosophical musings to the radiant city plans of Renaissance thinkers, is directly descended from these myths. Urban planners throughout history have attempted to impose heavenly order onto earthly grids, creating cities with grand boulevards, symmetrical layouts, and centralized temples or capitals, all in a conscious effort to build a microcosm of the divine realm, a place where justice, peace, and beauty could flourish as they were said to do in the God's own domains. The heavenly realms, in their perfect architecture, gave us a goal, a template for what we, as a species, might one day achieve. Yet after building the heavens and the earth, the divine architects faced their most complex and intimate design challenge, populating their magnificent creation with beings who could appreciate it, interact with it, and perhaps even understand the mind of the Creator. This brings us to one of the most profound and personal of all mythological projects, the deliberate design of humanity itself. Far from being an afterthought, humanity is often presented as the crowning achievement of these cosmic builders, though the process of getting there was rarely straightforward. In ancient Sumer, one of the very first great civilizations, the gods were not distant overlords but hardworking deities who had grown tired of the immense labor required to maintain their world. They needed a workforce. The solution, as told in the myth of Inca and Ninmah, was a stroke of creative engineering. The gods gathered clay from the primordial waters of the Abzu, the watery abyss, and mixed it with the blood and intelligence of a sacrificed god, fashioning the first humans. This was not a random act of magic. It was a calculated act of divine bioengineering, creating a new being specifically designed for a purpose, to serve as laborers who would maintain the temples, work the fields, and free the gods from their toil. Humanity's very origin, in this view, is rooted in function and utility, a deliberate addition to the cosmic architecture. This theme of iterative design, of trial and error in the divine workshop, is even more strikingly illustrated in the Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the Kayich Maya. Here, the creator gods, heart of sky and sovereign plumed serpent, are driven not by a need for laborers, but by a deep desire to be recognized, praised, and revered. Their first attempt to create beings capable of offering gratitude was, by their own standards, a complete failure. They fashioned men from mud. These creatures were soft, unstable, and dissolved back into the earth. They could speak, but their words were meaningless and their faces were blank. They could not move their heads to look to the heavens, and they showed no understanding of their creators. The gods washed them away, a flawed prototype discarded. The second attempt used wood. This was an improvement. The wooden people could walk and talk and multiply. But they were hollow, empty. They had no hearts, no memories, no souls. They could not remember where they came from and felt no gratitude. They were merely automatons, and the gods, deeply dissatisfied, sent a great flood to wipe them out, with the survivors said to have become the monkeys in the trees. It was only on the third attempt that the gods found the perfect material, maize, the sacred sustenance of life. They ground white and yellow corn, mixed it with water to form a dough, and from this life-giving substance, they crafted the first true humans. These beings possessed vision, wisdom, and understanding. Most importantly, they could look upon the world and upon the gods with genuine awe and offer thanks. The architects had finally perfected their design. This incredible narrative is so much more than a simple creation story. It is a powerful exploration of what it means to be human. The Maya gods were not just building a being, they were engineering consciousness itself. They were trying to install the software of gratitude and the hardware of spiritual awareness. The choice of maize is profoundly significant. It roots humanity not in base earth or inert wood, but in a substance that requires cultivation, that symbolizes growth, sustenance, and community. We are, according to this myth, literally made from that which nourishes us, connecting our very existence to the cycles of nature and the care required to sustain life. These myths from across the world present us with a startling and humbling self-image. We are not accidental inhabitants of a ready-made world. We are crafted entities imbued with a purpose by our divine architects. Whether that purpose is to labor, to worship, or to simply appreciate the beauty of the cosmos, the implication is that we are here for a reason. This foundational idea forces us to confront profound questions of identity and responsibility. If we are designed, what is our function? If we were created with intention, what does that demand of us? It establishes a relationship between creator and creation that is fraught with complexity. Are we servants, children, partners, or perhaps unfinished projects? This ancient architectural view of human origin challenges us to consider our own role in the ongoing cosmic design, suggesting that our drive to create, to build, and to seek meaning is not just a cultural trait, but something woven into the very fabric of our being by the original builders themselves. Once the divine architects had established the cosmos and placed humanity within it, they provided a revolutionary tool to bridge the immense gap between the heavenly and the earthly, the sacred space. This was not about building mere shelters for ritual, but about creating precise, powerful conduits, architectural portals designed with one explicit purpose: to make the intangible tangible, to bring a sliver of the divine realm directly into the mortal world. Across cultures, the instructions for these structures came not from human imagination, but from direct divine revelation, as if the gods were handing down their own blueprints for a spiritual technology meant to connect creation with its creator. Consider the incredible detail found in the biblical book of Exodus. When God instructs Moses on the construction of the tabernacle, the description is intensely technical and specific. The dimensions of every curtain, the type of wood for the frames, the precise alloy of gold for the sacred vessels, every element is dictated. This was not a suggestion, it was a divine schematic. The tabernacle was designed to be a portable piece of heaven on earth, a tent that could travel with the Israelites through the wilderness but whose interior layout, the holy place and the innermost holy of holies, created a graduated, structured approach to the divine presence. It was architecture as a vessel, a carefully crafted container meant to house the immanence of God Himself, demonstrating that the divine could be invited to dwell within a space built to exact cosmic specifications. This established a profound principle: that through obedient, precise construction, humanity could participate in creating a point of contact with the ultimate architect. This concept of building to a cosmic plan finds perhaps its most elaborate expression in the ancient Hindu tradition of Vastu Shastra, the science of architecture and design. Here, the construction of a temple is far more than erecting a beautiful building. It is an act of spiritual alignment. A temple dedicated to Vishnu or Shiva is not placed arbitrarily. Its entire design is a mandala, a symbolic map of the universe. The central tower, the shikara, represents the mythical Mount Meru, the axis mundi or world axis that connects all planes of existence. The layout aligns with cardinal directions, channeling cosmic energies. The placement of deities, the proportions of the halls, the geometry of the spire, every single element is calculated to mirror the macrocosm of the universe within the microcosm of the temple. Worshippers don't just enter a building, they step into a condensed model of divine order, walking a path that symbolically moves from the outer world of illusion toward the inner sanctum of ultimate truth. The architecture itself becomes a spiritual guide, a three-dimensional hymn to the gods who designed reality. These sacred spaces, from the mobile tabernacle to the eternal stone temples of India, fundamentally reshaped human experience. They transformed the abstract concept of a distant god into something accessible, something that could be approached literally and figuratively. They gave communities a focal point, a physical and spiritual center that anchored their identity and their faith. This divine architectural principle, that physical form can channel spiritual force, echoes far beyond explicitly religious structures. It can be felt in the awe-inspiring nave of a Gothic cathedral, where soaring vaults and filtered light pull the gaze and the spirit heavenward. It's present in the serene harmony of a Japanese Zen garden, where carefully raked gravel and placed stones create a miniature landscape designed to facilitate meditation and inner peace. Even the sense of quiet reverence one might feel in a grand library or a monumental public hall is a distant echo of this ancient impulse. The belief that a space, when designed with intention and according to a higher principle, can elevate those who enter it, acting as a true bridge between our world and something greater. Yet after designing the grand structures of the cosmos and the intricate vessels of sacred spaces, the divine architects faced their most abstract and essential task. They had to write the instruction manual for reality itself. This brings us to a project of breathtaking scope and subtlety, one that underpins every other creation, the engineering of natural laws. These primordial beings were not merely construction foremen, they were cosmic legislators establishing the fundamental rules of physics, biology, and society that would govern their new universe. They moved from crafting the stage to programming the very code of existence, ensuring their creation wouldn't collapse into the chaos from which it was born. In the Babylonian epic Enuma Elish, the god Marduk's victory over the primordial sea monster Tiamat is only the beginning. His true act of genius lies in what he does next. He takes her slain body and literally builds with it, using one half to form the dome of the heavens and the other to anchor the foundation of the earth. But his work doesn't stop at mere physical construction. He then appoints stations for the great gods, fixes the stars in their constellations like jewels set in a celestial crown, and defines the length of the year by carefully orchestrating the movements of the sun and moon. He commands the gates of the dawn and the dusk to open and close with perfect regularity, establishing the unbreakable rhythm of day and night. Marduk isn't just building a world, he is writing its operating system, programming the cycles of time and the laws of motion that would allow life to eventually take root and thrive. This is the ultimate act of divine engineering, transforming a volatile, war-torn void into a predictable, ordered cosmos that runs on a set of meticulously designed principles. This concept of a law-giving creation is echoed profoundly in the ancient and ongoing spiritual traditions of Australia's Aboriginal peoples. Their understanding of the dreamtime or dreaming presents a different but equally powerful model of cosmic engineering. The dreamtime is not a distant past but a sacred and eternal dimension, a time outside of time when ancestral beings, often part human, part animal, part nature, journeyed across the formless land. As they moved, they sang the world into existence. Their songs did not just describe the world, They were the world, weaving together the landscape, its inhabitants, and the laws that would bind them forever. A kangaroo ancestor hopping across the plains didn't just leave footprints. It established the very nature of kangaroo-ness, its method of movement, its social behaviors, its relationship to the plants it eats and the seasons it follows. These ancestral beings instituted the laws of kinship, ceremony, and ecology, creating a complex web of relational obligations between all living things and the land itself. This is a living architecture of law, where the natural order is not a set of impersonal forces but a narrative, a songline that must be continually sung and celebrated through ritual to keep the world in balance. The law is the land, and the land is the law, an unbreakable contract written into the very fabric of reality by the original architects. This divine role as the legislator of reality represents a crucial intersection where mythology and early science begin to dance together. Before the formal scientific method, these stories provided the first framework for a predictable, understandable universe. The idea that the sun rises and sets not by whim but because a god like Marduk decreed it so, or that seasons change according to a narrative established in the dreaming, gave ancient humanity a powerful tool, the ability to anticipate, to plan, and to trust in the consistency of their world. This trust is the absolute bedrock of science. It's the belief that the universe operates according to fixed, discoverable rules. The gods in these myths established the first constants, the mathematical regularities, the biological cycles, the gravitational pull, that human curiosity could later seek to measure, quantify, and explain. The priest astronomers of Babylon charting the stars were studying the patterns set by Marduk. The Aboriginal elders teaching the songlines were preserving the ecological and astronomical knowledge encoded by the ancestral beings. In both cases, the divine architectural project provided the stable foundation upon which all human observation, inquiry, and understanding could be built, turning the awe-inspired gaze toward the heavens into the first steps of scientific discovery. Yet after establishing the laws of nature and the grand architecture of the cosmos, the divine builders turned their attention to the finer details of their creation, populating it with a breathtaking array of life. But their creative vision extended far beyond the natural animals we know. They also designed and fabricated mythical creatures and beings, each one a unique expression of their power, purpose, and profound creativity. This was biodiversity of the most fantastical kind, a divine menagerie where every creature, no matter how strange, was crafted with a specific role to play in the grand schematic of existence. The gods were not just architects of space, but the ultimate inventors of life itself, and their workshops produced some of mythology's most enduring and fascinating figures. Consider the divine blacksmith of the Greek pantheon, Hephaestus. Lame and rejected by his mother Hera, he channeled his pain and isolation into a peerless genius for invention. His workshop, often said to be beneath volcanoes, was a forge of wonders where he didn't just make weapons and jewelry, he built living, or at least moving, beings. He crafted golden handmaidens, automata with the intelligence to assist him in his work, moving and speaking of their own accord. His masterpiece of defense was Tolos, a colossal bronze giant forged for Zeus to protect the island of Crete. This automaton was not a mindless machine. It was programmed with a single, devastating purpose, patrolling the coastline and hurling massive boulders at any approaching hostile ships. Tolos's one vulnerability, a single bronze nail sealing his life force into his body, was a brilliant piece of divine engineering, a built-in failsafe that made this guardian both incredibly powerful and ultimately controllable. Hephaestus's creations show us that the gods were not only builders of static structures but also of complex, functional beings designed to maintain and protect the order they had established. This theme of symbolic creation takes a different, more cerebral form in the myths of ancient Egypt. The god Thoth, the divine scribe and patron of all knowledge, was believed to be the designer of the animal kingdom itself. He didn't just create animals at random, he shaped them as living hieroglyphs, each species embodying a specific principle or aspect of wisdom. The ibis, with its long, curved beak that could probe the mud for food without dirtying its pristine white feathers, became Thoth's sacred bird, a perfect symbol for the pursuit of knowledge, seeking truth in the messy depths of existence while remaining intellectually pure. The baboon, often depicted alongside Thoth, was seen as a creature of wisdom because it would sit contemplatively at dawn, seeming to welcome the sun and the new day. In this worldview, the entire animal kingdom was a carefully architected library of divine concepts, a living language where every creature was a word and every behavior a sentence written by a god. This transforms nature from a random collection of species into a deliberate, designed text, meant to be read and understood by humanity. These mythical beings, from Hephaestus's bronze automaton to Thoth's symbolic fauna, served a multitude of crucial purposes in the divine plan. They acted as guardians, protecting sacred spaces, treasures, or knowledge from those who were unworthy or intended harm. They served as symbols, making complex divine attributes tangible and understandable through a recognizable form: a giant of bronze for implacable strength, an ibis for meticulous wisdom. And they often served as helpers or agents, carrying out the will of the gods in realms where direct intervention was not desired. But on a deeper level, this incredible bestiary explores profound themes that still resonate today. It reflects an ancient understanding of biodiversity, a sense that a thriving world is filled with a vast and purposeful variety of life. It delves into the power of symbolism, showing how we use creatures both real and imagined to give form to our deepest fears, greatest hopes, and most abstract ideas. And perhaps most intriguingly, it probes the very boundaries of creation itself, questioning what it means to make life, to animate the inanimate, and to play with the fundamental forces of existence. These stories of divinely crafted creatures are the ancient precursors to our own dreams of artificial intelligence and genetic engineering, reminding us that the urge to build life is as old as mythology itself. After establishing the laws of nature and populating the world with life, the divine architects turned their attention to perhaps their most abstract and profound project, the very framework of existence itself. They began to design time, not just the measurement of days and years, but the grand, sweeping architecture of destiny, fate, and the cycles that govern all of creation. This was no longer about building in space, but about engineering the fourth dimension, crafting a temporal structure that would give shape and meaning to the entire human experience. If the cosmos was their cathedral, then time was its liturgy, a carefully composed rhythm of beginnings, endings, and renewals that made the universe not just a place but a story. Nowhere is this concept more vividly realized than beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, the great world tree of Norse mythology. Here at the Well of Urd reside the three Norns, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld. Their names translate to fate, being, and necessity, or what was, what is, and what shall be. These powerful female figures are not merely fortune tellers, they are the master weavers of the cosmic tapestry. Each day they draw water from the well and mix it with sacred clay to pour over Yggdrasil's roots, preserving the tree from decay. But their primary work is at the loom. They spin immense threads of different lengths and colors, each one representing the life of a god, a giant, a human, or even a kingdom. They weave these threads into an ever-expanding, impossibly complex fabric that is the tapestry of fate itself. A golden thread might signify a period of great prosperity, while a frayed, dark thread could foretell a coming war or personal tragedy. Even the mighty Odin, the All-Father, is subject to their design. He sacrificed an eye at Mimir's well not to change his fate, but to gain the wisdom to understand it, to see the patterns the Norns had already woven. This Norse view presents destiny not as a random occurrence, but as a preordained, beautifully intricate design, a narrative crafted by divine hands where every life, no matter how small, is a vital thread in the grand pattern of the cosmos. A world away, in the sun-drenched valleys of Mexico, the Aztecs held a different but equally powerful vision of temporal architecture, one dominated by a relentless and demanding cycle of creation and destruction. Their cosmos was not a single, linear timeline, but a series of successive worlds or suns. Each sun was its own age, governed by a different deity and populated by a different kind of humanity, and each was destined to be catastrophically destroyed. The first sun, Nahui Oslotl, was ruled by Tezcatlipoca and destroyed by jaguars. The second, Nahui Ehecatl, presided over by Quetzalcoatl, was ended by great winds. The third, Nahui Quiahuatl, governed by Tlaloc, was consumed by a rain of fire, and the fourth, Nahui Atl, presided over by Chalchutlicue, ended in a global flood. We live now in the fifth sun, Nahui Olan, or the Age of Movement, governed by the sun god Tanatia. This era was born at the sacred city of Teotihuacan when the gods Nanahuatzin and Tecusistecatl sacrificially leaped into a divine bonfire to become the sun and moon. But this age, too, is considered temporary. The Aztecs believed it would ultimately be destroyed by earthquakes, and the sun would cease to move across the sky. This cyclical view of time is architecture on a monumental scale. It's not a single building but a city of eras where entire worlds are constructed, inhabited for a cosmic season, and then deliberately demolished to make way for the next iteration. The purpose of human life in this framework was stark. Through ritual, ceremony, and even sacrifice, humanity's sacred duty was to provide to Natia with the divine energy, the tonali. He needed to continue his journey across the sky, thus postponing the inevitable collapse of their world and maintaining the structural integrity of the current age. These intricate systems of fate and cyclical time provided ancient societies with something invaluable, a framework for understanding. In a world filled with uncertainty, disease, and conflict, the idea that time itself had a design offered profound comfort and meaning. It suggested that suffering was not random cruelty but part of a larger, purposeful pattern that, while perhaps incomprehensible from a human perspective, was ultimately intentional. This belief gave rise to some of humanity's most sophisticated intellectual pursuits. The Maya, for instance, developed a dizzying array of interlocking calendars, the 260-day Tzolk'in for ritual cycles, the 365-day Hob for solar years, and the long count for vast historical epochs, all designed to track the divine architecture of time and ensure human rituals were perfectly synchronized with the cosmic plan. In ancient India, the concept of the yugas, vast cycles of time that see the world descend from a golden age of truth to a dark age of ignorance before ascending once more, provided a philosophical framework for understanding history's ebbs and flows, seeing them not as decline but as part of a necessary, repeating cycle of spiritual renewal. This architectural view of time transformed history from a random sequence of events into a narrative with rhythm, prophecy into a reading of blueprints yet to be built, and the human experience into a journey along a path that, while perhaps predetermined, was rich with purpose and part of a design infinitely greater than oneself. But the grand architectural vision of the gods was not confined to the world of the living or the celestial heights. It also extended deep below, into the profound and often terrifying mystery of what comes after. Just as they designed glorious heavenly realms, the divine architects turned their considerable skills to a far more somber and complex project, the meticulous construction of underworlds and afterlife realms. These were not mere pits of oblivion or shadowy waiting rooms. They were intricate, purpose-built domains, carefully engineered to process, judge, and accommodate the souls of the deceased according to a divine system of justice and spiritual consequence. In building these subterranean worlds, the gods were creating the ultimate moral and metaphysical infrastructure, a framework that would define a culture's deepest values and its understanding of the soul's final journey. Perhaps no underworld was more elaborately architected than the Egyptian Duat. This was not a single location but a vast, complex netherworld, a labyrinthine realm of caverns, rivers, and fiery lakes that the sun god Ra was believed to navigate each night in his solar bark. But for the soul of a deceased human, the Duat was a perilous gauntlet of tests and judgments, a spiritual obstacle course designed by Osiris, the green-skinned lord of the dead, and his divine council. The journey was meticulously detailed in funerary texts like the Book of the Dead, which served as a literal guidebook or blueprint for the afterlife. The soul had to know the names of the demons guarding each gate, recite the correct spells to pacify hostile beings, and navigate the geography of this terrifying otherworld. The climax of this architectural journey was the Hall of Two Truths, where the deceased's heart was weighed against the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and cosmic order. This was the ultimate divine engineering, a perfectly balanced scale, a mechanism of absolute justice. If the heart was heavy with sin, it was devoured by the monstrous Ammit, resulting in a second, final death. But if it was as light as the feather, the soul was granted access to the blissful field of reeds, a perfected mirror of the life they had known, but without suffering or want. The entire structure of the Duat, from its guarded gates to its final judgment hall, was a masterclass in architectural metaphor, physically manifesting the Egyptian belief that a righteous life was a carefully constructed one, built in harmony with divine order. The Greek vision of the afterlife, presided over by the stern god Hades, presented a different but equally deliberate architectural model, one of segregation and classification. The underworld was not a single monolithic realm of shadows as it is sometimes simplified to be. It was a precisely divided territory, a sprawling complex with distinct wings designed for specific spiritual outcomes. The most famous of these were the contrasting domains of Elysium and Tartarus. Elysium, or the Elysian Fields, was the glorious paradise reserved for heroes, the virtuous, and those related to the gods. It was described as a place of perfect peace, soft meadows, and gentle breezes, an architectural expression of eternal reward and rest. In stark, dramatic contrast lay Tartarus. This was the deep, secure prison for the truly wicked, a pit far below even Hades itself, where titans like Cronus were imprisoned, and where souls guilty of atrocities against the gods or their fellow humans faced eternal, fitting punishment. Figures like Sisyphus, forever pushing his boulder up a hill, or Tantalus, eternally tormented by hunger and thirst, were not merely suffering, they were part of the built environment, permanent fixtures in this grim penal colony. This clear architectural separation, this divine zoning of the soul, reinforced a powerful social and ethical code for the living. It presented a tangible blueprint for the consequences of one's actions, making abstract concepts of good and evil into concrete, physical destinations in the geography of the afterlife. These intricately designed underworlds did far more than just answer the fearful question of what happens after death. They provided a complete narrative structure for the most profound transition a human can face. They offered a map for the unknowable journey, complete with challenges, judges, and final destinations. This architectural vision had a direct and powerful impact on the world of the living. It influenced elaborate funerary practices, like the Egyptian tradition of mummification and burial with grave goods, which were seen as essential supplies for the soul's journey through the Duat's challenges. It shaped entire ethical and legal systems, as the threat of an architecturally specific hell like Tartarus or the promise of a blissful Elysium became a powerful motivator for moral behavior, a divine enforcement mechanism for societal laws. Ultimately, these built underworlds stand as some of the most psychologically insightful projects of the divine architects. They gave tangible form to humanity's deepest hopes and darkest fears about justice, morality, and the ultimate fate of the self, constructing not just realms for the dead, but a meaningful framework for how the living choose to build their lives. But the ambition of the divine architects was not limited to the heavens or the underworld. It also found breathtaking expression right here on Earth in the form of magnificent, divinely planned cities. These were not just places for gods to visit. They were conceived as their earthly capitals, perfect urban centers designed to be the beating hearts of power, culture, and civilization itself. They served as the ultimate model of an ideal society, a celestial blueprint translated into stone and mortar, showing humanity exactly how to build a community that reflected the harmony and order of the cosmos. These mythical metropolises became the archetype for every sacred city that would follow, inspiring kings and planners for millennia with their vision of perfect urban life. In the lush, vibrant tapestry of Hindu mythology, we find a stunning example of this ideal in the city of Aloka. This was the celestial capital of Kubera, the god of wealth and the treasurer of the gods. Imagine a city carved into the majestic Himalayas, its spires glittering with gold and precious gems, a place where the very trees bore pearls and flowers of gold. The texts describe palaces with crystal floors and jeweled pillars, where celestial music constantly fills the air and the gardens are forever in bloom. But Aloka's splendor is more than just opulent decoration. It represents a perfect economy, a society where abundance is the natural state and beauty is integrated into every structure. It is a city where architecture and nature exist in flawless harmony, a divine vision of prosperity made manifest in urban form. This wasn't a city meant to be envied from afar. It was a template, a demonstration of what was possible when a community was built according to divine principles of wealth, art, and harmonious living. This concept of the divinely founded city finds its earliest and perhaps most influential expression in the ancient myths of Mesopotamia, the very cradle of urbanization. Here, the city of Eridu holds a place of supreme importance. It was not founded by a human king, but was established by the gods themselves, with the water god Enki as its patron. Eridu was considered the first city, the primordial model from which all other cities and human civilization itself would flow. It was the place where the divine mare, the fundamental decrees and concepts of civilization, like kingship, crafts, and law, were first kept. The city's layout centered around its great temple, the Iabzu, or House of the Watery Deep, was a direct reflection of this cosmic order. It was a sacred center, a point where the divine will was made accessible to humanity. By building their own cities in emulation of Eridu, the Sumerians believed they were participating in a sacred act, grounding their own society in the original, God-given blueprint for urban life. The ziggurat at the heart of every Mesopotamian city was not just a temple, it was a recreation of that first holy site, a man-made mountain striving to touch the realm of the architects who had shown them the way. The profound impact of these mythical cities on actual human history cannot be overstated. They provided a powerful aspirational model, a vision of the polis or the community as a work of art and a vessel for the divine. You can see this influence clearly in the philosophical ideal of the Platonic Republic, a perfectly structured city-state governed by reason and justice, much like a god might design. Later, during the Renaissance, visionary architects and artists drew directly upon these ancient ideals. When they planned their ideal cities, with geometrically perfect squares, radiating streets, and centrally placed domes, they were attempting to achieve on Earth what the gods had achieved in myth, an urban environment that embodied mathematical harmony, social order, and spiritual beauty. This divine inspiration even echoes in the ambitious urban planning of modern capitals like Washington, D.C., with its grand avenues and monumental core designed to express national ideals of democracy and order. The dream of Aloka and the precedent of Eridu taught humanity that a city could be more than just a collection of buildings. It could be a conscious act of world building, a statement of values, and a lasting monument to our eternal aspiration to build a society worthy of the gods themselves. Yet even with these grand urban plans and celestial domains, the divine architects understood that a creation without definition is vulnerable to collapse. A universe of pure potential is also a universe of pure chaos, so they embarked on a project of profound, fundamental necessity, the construction of cosmic barriers and boundaries. This was the ultimate act of divine zoning, the drawing of literal and metaphorical lines in the sand of existence to separate the realms of order from the ever-lurking void, to protect the sacred from the profane, and to give a defined, safe space for life to unfold. These were not suggestions or gentle guidelines, they were the load-bearing walls of reality, the divine infrastructure of separation that made a stable cosmos possible. We see this principle enacted with beautiful, stark simplicity in the Japanese creation myth of Izanagi and Izanami. Standing on the floating bridge of heaven, the two primordial deities looked down upon the swirling, oily, chaotic sea that was all that existed. Their solution was not a complex spell or a violent battle, but a profoundly architectural act. They dipped the jeweled spear, Aim no Nuboko, into the primordial waters and stirred. When they lifted the spear, the brine that dripped from its tip coagulated and hardened, forming the first island, Onagoro. This single, deliberate action performed the most basic function of construction. It created a firm, stable foundation where before there was none. It was the act of defining here from there, of pulling solid land from formless ocean. This new boundary didn't just create the Japanese archipelago, it established the very concept of separation between the solid and the liquid, the stable and the unstable, the habitable and the uninhabitable. It was the first and most essential act of world building. A similar, but far more defensive, architectural imperative drove the Norse gods to construct one of the most famous walls in mythology, the immense barrier surrounding Asgard. Following a devastating war with the Vanir gods, the walls of their celestial home lay in ruins, leaving them terrifyingly exposed to the constant threat of invasion from the giants of Jotunheim. Their need for security was paramount. Along came a mysterious builder, a horseman who offered to complete an impregnable fortress in just 3 seasons, and his price was the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freyja. The gods, believing the task impossible, agreed, but with strict conditions. The builder, who was of course a giant in disguise, nearly succeeded with the help of his miraculous stallion, Svadilfari. Only through Loki's treachery was the work stopped just short of completion. The resulting wall, though not fully finished, was still mighty enough to serve its primary purpose, to act as a formidable defensive perimeter. It transformed Asgard from a vulnerable settlement into a fortified citadel, a clearly defined space of divine order and safety set against the chaotic wilderness of the giants. The wall itself became a symbol of the Aesir's identity. Who they were was, in part, defined by who they kept out. This divine drive to erect boundaries is far more than a mythological quirk. It is a foundational impulse that resonates deeply with the human experience. From the moment we are born, we seek to impose order on our environment through division and definition. A child builds a sandcastle and draws a moat around it, not just for decoration, but to claim a space as their own, to separate their creation from the vast, undefined beach. As adults, we build fences around our homes, survey lines between properties, and borders between nations. We create laws and social contracts that act as intangible boundaries for behavior. These are all human-scale echoes of the gods' first acts of separation. We are instinctively following the primordial blueprint that for creation to be safe, sustainable, and meaningful, it must have defined limits. It requires a this that is not that. The cosmic barriers of myth validate this deep-seated human need for security and identity, showing us that the urge to build a wall, whether of stone or of principle, is not a sign of weakness but an ancient, sacred act of preservation, a way to cultivate order within the infinite and often frightening potential of the unknown. But after building the walls of cities and the boundaries between worlds, the divine architects faced a unique challenge. How could they ensure their magnificent creation continued to function smoothly across the ages? The answer lay not in stone or mortar, but in action. They designed the most ethereal yet enduring of all their structures, the ritual. This was architecture in time, a carefully choreographed sequence of words, gestures, and offerings, engineered to act as the operating system for the cosmos itself, a perpetual maintenance program for reality. In the ancient Vedic traditions of India, this concept finds its purest expression in the figure of Prajapati, the lord of creatures. Prajapati is not just a creator god, he is the ritual itself. The myths tell us that through a great act of sacrifice, of self-offering, Prajapati became the universe, but this act of creation exhausted him, leaving the cosmos dangerously unstable, its parts beginning to drift apart. His solution was to give humanity the very rituals that had powered his own creative act. He architected the complex fire sacrifices, the yajna, providing the precise liturgical blueprints that would allow priests to essentially reenact the original sacrifice, pouring offerings into the sacred fire to generate the spiritual energy needed to rejuvenate Prajapati, and by extension, hold the fabric of reality together. In this profound view, the universe is not a static object but a dynamic process, a delicate equilibrium that requires constant human participation through perfectly performed ceremony to keep it from collapsing back into chaos. The ritual is the load-bearing wall of existence. This understanding of ceremony as essential infrastructure is echoed across the ocean in the wisdom traditions of many Native American nations. Here, the Great Spirit, or the Creator, is often described as gifting the people with specific ceremonies to ensure balance and harmony in the world. The Sun Dance of the Plains peoples is a powerful example. This is not merely a cultural performance, it is a ceremony of immense spiritual gravity and physical endurance, a collective prayer enacted through dance, drumming, and sacrifice, intended to renew the entire world. The specific actions, the songs, the construction of the sacred lodge, and the central tree, every element is a carefully passed down instruction, a divine schematic for generating healing and connection. It is an act of reciprocal maintenance. By performing the ceremony correctly, the people uphold their end of a sacred covenant, ensuring the continued rotation of the seasons, the return of the buffalo, and the well-being of the community. The ceremony architects a state of grace, building a temporary but powerful bridge between the human and spirit worlds that reinforces the bonds of all creation. These ritual architectures, from the Vedic fire altar to the sun dance lodge, provided humanity with something indispensable, a framework for meaning. They transformed abstract faith into tangible, repeatable action. They offered a script for the most profound human experiences: birth, coming of age, marriage, death, guiding individuals and communities through life's transitions with a sense of divine order and purpose. The rhythmic recitation of a prayer, the specific steps of a dance, the precise arrangement of offerings on an altar, these were not empty routines. They were the gears and pulleys of a cosmic machine, and by performing them, even the most ordinary person could become a vital technician in the maintenance of the universe, their actions directly linked to the turning of the stars and the fertility of the earth. This sacred technology gave people agency in a vast and often incomprehensible cosmos, a way to actively participate in the divine plan and ensure their world remained in harmony with the original blueprint laid down by the first architects. And so we arrive at one of the most transformative and intimate projects undertaken by the divine architects, the very framework of human thought and memory. After building the cosmos, establishing laws, and shaping humanity, the gods provided the ultimate tool for us to not only navigate this grand design, but to actively contribute to it. They gifted us language and, most miraculously, the technology of writing. This was not merely a convenience, it was the final, crucial piece of infrastructure that allowed a scattered, ephemeral species to become partners in the ongoing work of creation, enabling us to record, to learn, and to build upon the knowledge of our ancestors. This project shifted humanity from being passive inhabitants of a designed world to active participants in its story. In the hallowed halls of Egyptian mythology, this monumental invention is credited to the ibis-headed god Thoth, the divine scribe and patron of all wisdom. Thoth did not simply invent a few letters, he architected an entire system of sacred writing hieroglyphs, or as the Egyptians called them, Medu Neter, the words of the god. Each hieroglyph was far more than a sound. It was a miniature work of art, a potent symbol bursting with multiple layers of meaning. A single character could represent a concept, a sound, or even provide a determinative to clarify the meaning of a word. This was a writing system designed to mirror the complexity of the cosmos itself, a visual language where a drawing of a bird or a wave could convey philosophical ideas, divine names, and eternal truths. Thoth's invention was the ultimate act of divine knowledge management, a technology that allowed the prayers of the priests, the laws of the pharaohs, and the rituals for the afterlife to be preserved with perfect precision for millennia. It was the hard drive for the Egyptian soul, ensuring that the sacred blueprint of Maat, or cosmic order, would never be forgotten. A similar, equally vital story unfolds in the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, where the goddess Nisaba presided over the harvest of grain and the far more abstract harvest of words. As the patron deity of scribes and writing, Nisaba was often depicted with a stylus and a clay tablet, the very tools of creation. Mythology tells us that she invented writing for a purpose of breathtaking administrative grandeur, to document the decrees of the gods themselves. In a divine assembly where fates were decided and cosmic laws were established, Nisaba was the secretary of the universe, meticulously inscribing the decisions onto her tablet. This act transformed writing from its very origin into an instrument of divine will and absolute authority. When this technology was passed to humanity, it revolutionized civilization. Suddenly, a king's law could be codified and displayed for all to see, creating a permanent, unchangeable standard of justice that was not subject to the faulty memory of a human official. A merchant's agreement could be recorded on a baked clay tablet, creating a contract that outlived the individuals who made it. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's first great literary work, could be set down, allowing the fears, triumphs, and existential questions of a culture to be shared across generations. Nisaba's gift provided the foundation for law, literature, and history, turning human experience from a fleeting whisper into an enduring record. The impact of these divine linguistic gifts is almost impossible to overstate. They were the fundamental catalysts that propelled humanity from prehistory into history. Before writing, knowledge was trapped in the fragile vessel of human memory, vulnerable to distortion, forgetfulness, and death. Stories could change with every telling, laws could be manipulated by powerful speakers, the wisdom of one generation could be lost to the next. But with the advent of the written word, a new kind of immortality was achieved. A thought, a discovery, or a story could be captured and could travel through time unchanged. This created an accumulating repository of collective knowledge, a shared external brain for our species. For the first time, a person could stand on the shoulders of giants they had never met, reading the words of a philosopher who died 1,000 years before and building upon their ideas. This is the very engine of progress, scientific, legal, and artistic. The divine architects in gifting us writing were not just giving us a tool for lists and letters, they were giving us the means to participate in their own creative act. We could now draft our own blueprints, compose our own symphonies of words, and write the ongoing story of our civilization, adding our own chapter to the magnificent and ever-unfolding project that began when the first god measured the void and began to build. Yet after gifting humanity the tools of language and writing, the divine architects revealed their most ambitious and far-reaching project of all, the engineering of human society itself. This was no longer about shaping the physical world or establishing natural laws. It was about designing the very blueprint for civilization, providing the foundational principles for justice, governance, and communal living that would allow scattered groups of people to coalesce into stable, flourishing societies. The gods moved from being creators of the cosmos to being the first lawgivers and social planners, offering a divine template for how we should live together. This profound shift in their role suggests that building a world was only half the task. The other, more delicate half was building a world that worked, a society that could sustain itself and reflect the order of the heavens here on earth. One of the most powerful and enduring examples of this divine legal engineering is the famed Code of Hammurabi. This ancient Babylonian set of laws, inscribed on a towering black stone stele, is one of the oldest and most complete legal codes ever discovered. But it is far more than a list of rules. It is a monument to divinely inspired justice. At the very top of the stele, we see a carved image of King Hammurabi standing before the enthroned sun god Shamash, the patron deity of justice. Shamash is handing the code of laws directly to the king, a powerful visual declaration that these are not merely human inventions or the arbitrary decrees of a ruler. They are presented as a direct gift from the divine, a sacred architecture for society bestowed by a God who saw all things and judged with perfect fairness. The laws themselves, with their famous principle of an eye for an eye, were designed to create balance and deter chaos, replacing the unpredictability of blood feuds with a standardized system of proportional justice. This was divine engineering applied to human conflict, creating a societal framework where actions had predictable, fair consequences, and where even the king himself was subject to a higher, God-given law. It established the revolutionary idea that justice should be blind, impartial, and accessible to all, a cornerstone of legal systems that would echo for thousands of years. On the other side of the world, in the high Andes of South America, A different god was engaged in a similar project of social engineering, but with a focus on harmony and collective welfare rather than retributive justice. The Inca creator god, Viracocha, was believed to have emerged from the depths of Lake Titicaca after a great flood had wiped away a previous, failed race of humanity. His mission was to begin anew, to build a world that would not collapse into darkness. He traveled across the land, shaping the terrain, and most importantly, teaching the people he encountered the essential arts of civilization. Viracocha provided the divine blueprint for the Inca social order, instructing them in agriculture, architecture, and, crucially, how to live together in a complex, interdependent society. He taught them the principles of Aini, a concept of sacred reciprocity and mutual aid that became the glue holding the Inca Empire together. This was not a law code carved in stone, but a social operating system woven into the fabric of daily life. It meant that every community member had both rights and responsibilities to the collective, creating a society where cooperation was a divine mandate and the well-being of the group was paramount. The immense success and stability of the Inca Empire, with its vast network of roads and storehouses ensuring no one went hungry, stands as a testament to the power of this socially engineered, God-given model of communal living. These divine guidelines, whether the detailed legalism of Hammurabi's code or the communal philosophy of Viracocha, served a universal and critical purpose. They provided an unquestionable source of authority for the rules that bind a society together. By attributing the laws to a god, ancient leaders could argue that challenging the social order was not just a political crime, but a sin against the cosmos itself. This divine sanction gave laws a weight and permanence that human decrees alone could never achieve, promoting stability and discouraging the chaos that comes from constantly shifting rules. This mythological framework became the ultimate source of moral and political architecture, offering a ready-made answer to the most difficult questions any society faces. Why should we be good? Why should we obey? The answer was that the architects of the universe themselves had drafted the plans for a just society. This idea influenced real-world governance for millennia, from the concept of the divine right of kings in Europe to the mandate of heaven in China, which held that a ruler's right to govern was granted by the celestial powers so long as they ruled with justice and virtue. Even the modern secular idea of universal human rights, which are often seen as inherent and inalienable, carries a faint echo of this ancient belief, that there exists a fundamental, higher law that transcends any government or ruler, a lasting legacy of the time when we believed our first laws were written in the stars by the hands of gods. Yet the divine architects knew that a well-designed world required more than just laws and social structures. It needed tools of immense power to shape destiny, defend order, and empower their most ambitious creations. This led to one of their most captivating projects, the meticulous crafting of mythical artifacts and tools. These were no ordinary objects. They were masterpieces of divine engineering, imbued with specific purposes and supernatural properties, acting as concentrated extensions of the god's own will and power. Whether forged in the heart of a volcano or conjured from pure magic, these artifacts became the legendary instruments through which the cosmic plan was executed, protected, and occasionally challenged. No figure embodies this divine craftsmanship more than the Greek god Hephaestus. Banished from Olympus for his lameness, he transformed his physical suffering into a source of unparalleled creative power within his fiery forges. His workshop was a divine factory, producing objects of both breathtaking beauty and terrifying function. For Zeus, his greatest patron, he forged the mighty thunderbolt, less a simple weapon and more a precision instrument of cosmic authority. It was the ultimate tool of enforcement, a concentrated blast of divine will that could shake the heavens and earth, ensuring the King of Gods could maintain the order he had established. But Hephaestus's genius also extended to protection. For the hero Achilles, at the request of his mother Thetis, the smith god crafted a shield that was nothing less than a microcosm of the world itself. Homer's epic description details a masterpiece of mythology depicting cities at peace and war, fields being harvested, and constellations dancing across its surface. This was not just a piece of armor, it was a portable, divine vision of civilization, a wearable testament to everything worth fighting for. Through these artifacts, Hephaestus didn't just make weapons, he encoded the values of the gods into tangible form, creating tools that could both destroy and preserve the delicate balance of the world. This theme of artifacts serving as a conduit for legitimacy and divine right finds a powerful expression in the Celtic myths of Ireland, centered on the Lia Fail, the Stone of Destiny. This was no ordinary rock. It was a sacred, self-aware monument, often described as a throne or a coronation stone, brought to Ireland by otherworldly beings known as the Tuatha Dé Danann. Its function was brilliantly simple yet politically profound. It would let out a mighty roar that could be heard across the island when the one true High King of Ireland stood upon it. This was divine engineering applied to governance, an oracle of stone designed to eliminate doubt and prevent civil war by providing an unambiguous, supernatural affirmation of a ruler's legitimacy. The stone acted as an impartial divine censor, cutting through political intrigue and mortal ambition to identify the individual whose soul resonated with the sacred sovereignty of the land itself. It transformed kingship from a matter of bloodline or conquest into a matter of cosmic compatibility, ensuring the ruler was literally in tune with the divine plan for the nation. Beyond their immediate narrative roles, these mythical artifacts carry profound symbolic weight that resonates through human history. They represent the absolute peak of innovation and craftsmanship, a level of skill so sublime it borders on magic. They embody the thrilling and dangerous idea of power being transferred from the divine realm to the mortal one. A hero wielding a god-forged sword or a king anointed by a sacred stone becomes something more than human. They become a partner or perhaps a pawn in the ongoing work of the cosmos. This concept fuels the engine of countless hero quests and legends. The arduous journey to retrieve a magical object, whether it's the Golden Fleece, the Holy Grail, or Thor's hammer Mjolnir, is never just about acquiring a powerful trinket. It is a transformative process where the seeker must prove their worth, overcome their flaws, and ultimately understand the responsibility that comes with wielding a fragment of divine power. The artifact is the reward, but the true prize is the growth and wisdom gained in its pursuit. In this way, these divine tools do more than drive plots. They inspire us to strive for excellence, to understand that true power must be earned, and to see our own human creativity and craftsmanship as a humble but worthy echo of the original architect's genius. But if the gods could engineer societies and forge artifacts of power, they also possessed the keys to a far more intimate and mysterious realm, the architecture of the inner self. They turned their creative vision inward, designing the very landscape of the human mind by constructing a hidden gateway to the divine, the realm of dreams and visions. This was perhaps their most subtle and brilliant project, building not with stone or metal, but with the raw material of consciousness itself, crafting a private, nocturnal theater where the walls between the mortal and the immortal grew thin, and the voice of the divine could speak directly to the soul. In the graceful pantheon of the Greeks, this sacred duty fell to the Wanneroi, the spirits of dreams, led by Morpheus, whose name means "he who forms." Morpheus was the divine master of shapes, an artist of the subconscious who could weave any form, any identity into the dreams of mortals. When the gods had a message to deliver, a warning of impending doom, a crucial piece of guidance, or a painful truth, they did not always send a thunderbolt or an eagle. They sent Morpheus. He would slip through the gates of horn, which produced true prophetic dreams, and craft a vision so vivid and compelling it could not be ignored. He could appear as a lost loved one to deliver comfort, as a king to issue a command, or as a monstrous beast to signify a hidden fear. His work was divine psychodrama, a carefully architected experience designed to bypass the waking ego and plant a seed directly in the deepest soil of the human psyche. The dream was not a random firing of neurons to the Greeks. It was a meticulously designed communication, a personalized letter from the gods, delivered under the cover of night and sealed with the authority of the divine. This concept of dreams as a continuous creative force finds its most profound expression in the ancient and ongoing spiritual traditions of Aboriginal Australia. Here, the Dreamtime is not a past event but an eternal, parallel dimension of reality, the very foundation of all existence. The Dreamtime ancestors did not simply create the world and retire. They continue to shape and sustain it through an ongoing relationship with the land and its people. And one of the primary channels for this continuous creation is the dream. For Aboriginal cultures, dreaming is an active state of being, a time when the soul can travel and communicate with these ancestral beings. The songs, stories, and intricate patterns of the land that were first sung into existence in the Dreamtime can be rediscovered and relearned through dreams. Elders might receive new songs or healing knowledge in their visions, ensuring the cultural and spiritual knowledge of the people remains alive and dynamically connected to its source. In this worldview, every human has the potential to become a co-architect of reality while they sleep, participating in the eternal dreaming that keeps the world in balance. The dream is not an escape from reality. It is a deeper engagement with its truest, most creative layer. This divine architecture of the mind provided humanity with an indispensable psychological and spiritual tool. It built a bridge between the frantic, logical, day-to-day consciousness and the vast, mysterious depths of the unconscious, where intuition, memory, and the collective wisdom of the species reside. Dreams became a sacred space for processing the unprocessable, for working through grief, for confronting fears in a safe environment, and for receiving creative inspiration that seemed to arrive from nowhere. The brilliant flash of insight that solves a problem, the haunting melody that composes itself in a composer's head, the visionary idea for a work of art, these have often been attributed to the dream state, seen as gifts from a divine muse or messages from a deeper self. The gods, in designing this system, gave us a built-in therapy session and innovation lab, a nightly retreat where we could receive guidance, heal our wounds, and tap into a wellspring of creativity that feels utterly transcendent. This ancient understanding of dreams as a meaningful dialogue with the divine directly prefigures the modern field of psychology. Sigmund Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams and Carl Jung's theories of the collective unconscious and archetypes are, in a way, secular echoes of this ancient belief. They are attempts to map and understand the very architecture that the myths attributed to gods like Morpheus, to decode the language of the symbols that visit us in the night, confirming the timeless human conviction that our dreams are not merely noise, but a profound and essential narrative written in the soul by the original architects of the mind. Now consider the sheer scale of the divine architect's work. With realms established from the highest heavens to the deepest underworlds, a critical logistical challenge emerged. How would the gods themselves move between these vastly separated domains? How would the essential cycles of day and night, or the seasons, be physically enforced across the cosmos? The answer lies in one of their most ingenious and dynamic projects, the creation of cosmic vehicles and pathways. This was divine infrastructure at its most functional, the engineering of mobility and connection to ensure their meticulously planned universe did not become a collection of isolated, stagnant worlds, but remained a vibrant, interconnected whole, humming with purpose and movement. Take the magnificent chariot of the Hindu sun god, Surya. Every single day, without fail, he embarks on his journey across the sky. But he does not simply will himself across the expanse. He rides in a resplendent chariot pulled by 7 powerful horses, each representing a different color of the rainbow or a different day of the week. His charioteer is Aruna, the personification of the dawn, who clears the path each morning. This is not merely a regal mode of transport. It is a precision timekeeping device, a celestial engine that guarantees the reliable progression of day into night. The chariot's unerring journey provides the rhythm for all life on Earth, dictating the cycles of growth, sleep, and activity. It transforms the abstract concept of time into a visible, predictable, and glorious spectacle, a daily reaffirmation that the cosmic order is being actively maintained by a god who is literally going the distance to make it happen. This theme of a solar vehicle is mirrored with a fascinating twist in the mythology of ancient Egypt. The sun god Ra also travels the sky by day, but his journey takes on a far more perilous dimension at night. As the sun sets, Ra transfers from his day bark, Manjet, into a night vessel called Mesektet. This solar bark then embarks on a treacherous 12-hour voyage through the underworld, the Duat. This journey is anything but a peaceful cruise. It is a nightly battle for survival. Ra's bark is attacked by the serpent god Apep, the embodiment of chaos and destruction, who seeks to halt the sun's progress and plunge the world into eternal darkness. Ra, defended by a crew of guards and the protective spells of the deceased, must defeat this chaos each night to be reborn at dawn. Here, the vehicle is more than just transport. It is a fortified battleship, a mobile fortress of order navigating the treacherous waters of oblivion. The solar bark symbolizes the incredible effort required to maintain creation, a daily struggle that must be won to ensure the sun rises again, making the vehicle itself a critical component in the eternal battle between order and chaos. For connecting fixed locations rather than traversing cyclical paths, the gods engineered permanent, monumental pathways. The most iconic of these is undoubtedly the Bifrost of Norse mythology. This burning rainbow bridge, brilliantly designed and constructed by the gods, connects the realm of the humans, Midgard, with the divine fortress of Asgard. It is guarded by the ever-vigilant god Heimdallr, who possesses such acute senses he can hear the grass grow and see for hundreds of miles. The Bifrost is not a public thoroughfare. It is a controlled access point, a shimmering artery between the mortal and the divine. Its purpose is twofold. It allows the gods to journey to the human world to interact with their worshippers and influence events, and it serves as the mustering point for the Einherjar, the chosen human warriors who will stand with the gods at the final battle of Ragnarok. The bridge is both a symbol of connection and a strategic defensive structure, beautiful yet functional, representing the fragile but essential link between humanity and the powers that shaped their world. These divinely engineered systems of transit do far more than just facilitate divine commuting. They are fundamental to the very operation of the cosmos. They are the physical manifestation of connection, the divinely sanctioned routes that ensure the flow of energy, influence, and life itself between the different tiers of existence. They transform the universe from a static sculpture into a dynamic, living organism. This profound concept deeply influenced the human imagination, giving rise to a rich tapestry of myths about magical journeys, quests to other worlds, and the search for pathways to the divine. The idea of a bridge to heaven, a stairway to the stars, or a ship that can sail to the edge of the world are all human echoes of these original cosmic designs. They speak to our innate desire to explore, to connect, and to transcend our immediate surroundings, inspired by the original architects who first mapped the roads between the worlds and built the vehicles to travel them. But perhaps the most ingenious and psychologically profound of all the divine architectural projects were not the grand structures of cities or the vehicles of the sun, but the intricate, often maddening constructions of the mind and spirit, the deliberate design of tests and challenges. The gods, in their role as master architects, understood that a perfect, untested creation was a fragile one, so they began to build obstacle courses for the soul, crafting labyrinths, puzzles, and ordeals that served as the ultimate proving grounds for worthiness, courage, and wisdom. These were not acts of random cruelty, but carefully calibrated instruments of transformation, metaphorical architectures where the very path itself was the teacher, and the only way out was through a fundamental change within. The most iconic example of this is, of course, the Labyrinth of Greek myth. Commissioned by King Minos of Crete to imprison the monstrous Minotaur, this sprawling, bewildering maze was the masterpiece of the mortal inventor Daedalus, a man whose genius was so profound it was considered divinely inspired. The labyrinth was more than just a prison. It was a psychological weapon, a structure designed to break the spirit through sheer disorientation. Its ever-twisting, identical corridors were a physical manifestation of hopelessness, a place where logic and memory were useless. To enter was to surrender to the maze, and at its heart waited the ultimate test, the ravenous Minotaur, a beast born of divine punishment and unnatural passion. This entire complex was a divine test engineered for the hero Theseus. His victory was not merely about slaying a monster, it was about navigating the impossible, maintaining his resolve in the face of utter confusion, and using the clever tool of Ariadne's thread to retrace his steps to freedom. The labyrinth was a machine for manufacturing heroes, an architectural puzzle that tested not just strength, but ingenuity, patience, and the will to overcome despair. This theme of divinely orchestrated trials finds a much more personal and philosophical expression in the great Hindu epics. Here, the gods frequently descend to interact with mortals directly, not just to test them, but to teach them. They architect elaborate illusions and seemingly impossible challenges designed to strip away a character's arrogance, attachments, or misconceptions. In the Mahabharata, the Pandava brothers face a relentless series of losses, exiles, and moral dilemmas, all of which serve to refine their understanding of dharma, or sacred duty. The god Indra might send a celestial nymph to test a sage's vow of chastity, not for trickery's sake, but to force a deeper, more resilient commitment that isn't based on easy circumstances. Lord Krishna, in his role as divine guide to the warrior Arjuna, doesn't just give him answers, he architects a profound philosophical discourse, the Bhagavad Gita, right on the battlefield, placing Arjuna in a state of ultimate crisis to force a spiritual awakening. These are challenges of consciousness designed to burn away ignorance and reveal a higher truth. The reward for passing these tests is rarely just a treasure or a throne. It is often a boon of wisdom, a glimpse of the divine form, or an inner peace that cannot be shaken by external events. On a fundamental level, these mythic tests reveal a staggering belief about the nature of reality itself. That challenge is not a flaw in the design, but a feature of it. The labyrinths and the illusions were intentionally built into the fabric of existence by the divine architects for a crucial purpose. They serve as the necessary friction that forces growth, the refiner's fire that tempers the soul. A hero who has never been tested is merely a person of potential. It is by walking the confusing path, facing the internal monster, and solving the divine riddle that potential is forged into genuine strength and wisdom. This transforms suffering and difficulty from meaningless pain into a purposeful, if difficult, curriculum. The narrative of the hero's journey, which lies at the heart of so many of these stories, is essentially the process of being tested, failing, learning, and ultimately being transformed by the ordeal itself. The maze changes the hero forever, and in doing so, it fulfills its true function. This ancient architectural view of challenge offers a powerful and enduring metaphor for our own lives, suggesting that the obstacles we face are not random impediments, but are, in fact, the very structures through which we build our own character, discover our own resources, and write our own stories of transformation. Having shaped the very fabric of reality and the inner workings of the human spirit, the divine architects turned their attention to a project of profound legacy and remembrance. They began to construct monuments and memorials, not as palaces or temples, but as permanent physical anchors for memory itself, ensuring that the pivotal moments of their cosmic drama would never fade from the world they had built. These structures were the divine equivalent of history books written in stone, eternal reminders etched into the landscape to commemorate great deeds, solemnize sacred agreements, and warn future generations of both the perils and the glories that defined their existence. This was mythology making a permanent claim on geography, turning a mere location into a story you could stand beside and touch. Consider the immense significance of the Pillars of Hercules in Greek legend. These were not merely two great rocks marking a shipping lane. They were the ultimate, thus far and no further, signpost of the ancient world. According to the myth, the hero Heracles, in the course of his famed labors, was tasked with journeying to the western edge of the world. To mark the absolute limit of his travels and, by extension, the boundary of the known and safe world for all Greeks, he either pushed apart two mountains or erected two great pillars on either side of the Strait of Gibraltar. This act was a monumental declaration, a geographic bookmark that separated the ordered, Mediterranean world of civilization from the terrifying and unknown vastness of the Atlantic Ocean, which they called the Sea of Darkness. The pillars became a powerful symbol of human endeavor meeting its limit, a permanent memorial to the greatest hero's journey, and a constant, sobering reminder that even divine strength had its frontiers. They told every sailor who passed between them that they were crossing from the mapped to the mysterious, from the stories already written to the ones yet to be discovered. This practice of inscribing myth directly onto the American landscape is central to the traditions of many Native American nations. Take the majestic monolith known today as Devil's Tower in Wyoming. To the Lakota and other Plains tribes, this striking geological formation is not a random volcanic feature. It is motto to pillar or bear lodge. Their sacred narratives tell of a group of children playing who were chased by a giant bear. As the bear reared up to claw at them, the rock beneath the children grew upwards towards the sky, saving them. The deep vertical grooves scoring the sides of the tower are the eternal scratches from the bear's desperate claws. This story is not just a tale told around a fire. The mountain itself is the proof, the memorial, and the primary text. The site is a church, a history museum, and a cultural archive all in one, a permanent, undeniable fixture that physically validates the oral tradition and connects every new generation directly to the moment of their ancestors' divine rescue. It ensures the lesson of the story of protection, of providence, of respect for the natural world is as enduring as the rock itself. these divinely commissioned monuments served a function far deeper than simple commemoration. They were the bedrock of cultural education in a world before widespread literacy. A young Greek boy learning about the Pillars of Hercules was not just learning a cool story about a strong guy. He was internalizing a fundamental concept of his culture's identity, where their world ended and the unknown began, and the heroic ideal of pushing right up to that very edge. A Lakota child hearing the story of Bear Lodge while looking at the actual tower wasn't just being entertained. They were being given a tangible connection to their people's past, a lesson in the spiritual forces that shape the world, and a permanent landmark that oriented them within their cultural and spiritual universe. These structures transformed abstract values and ancient narratives into immutable facts of the physical world, creating a shared heritage that everyone could see and agree upon. They were the ultimate teaching tools, ensuring that the core values, historical triumphs, and cautionary tales of a people would outlive empires and outlast languages, standing as silent, steadfast teachers for all time. And so we arrive at one of the most subtle and all-encompassing of the divine architectural projects, one that moves beyond the visible and into the very fabric of perception itself. After building with stone and law, with time and society, the gods revealed that their most fundamental building block was not something that could be seen or touched, but something that could be heard. They architected sound. In numerous traditions, the cosmos did not begin with a big bang of random chaos, but with a precisely tuned note, a sacred frequency that vibrated through the void, structuring emptiness into form and harmony. This is the concept of sonic architecture, the breathtaking idea that reality itself is a kind of music, and that the gods were the original composers, tuning the universe into existence. Perhaps the most profound expression of this is found in the ancient Hindu concept of Nada Brahma, which translates to "the world is sound." Here, the primal cause of everything is not a physical act, but an auditory one, the syllable Am or Aum. This sacred sound is considered the very first vibration, the initial pulse that emerged from the silence of the unmanifest. It is described as the divine hum of the universe, the resonant frequency that underlies and sustains all of creation. The act of creation, then, is not one of assembly but of tuning. The Am is the fundamental tone from which all other frequencies, all matter, all energy, all consciousness derive. Modern string theory in physics offers a fascinating parallel, proposing that the smallest building blocks of the universe are not particles but tiny, vibrating strings, and that the properties of those particles are determined by the string's resonant frequency. The ancient rishis and the modern physicists millennia apart seem to converge on a similar idea, that the deepest layer of reality is not static stuff, but dynamic vibration, a cosmic symphony composed by a divine intelligence. This is architecture at its most essential, building not with walls and beams, but with harmonics and resonance, crafting a universe that is literally singing itself into being. This divine power of sound is personified in the Greek myth of Orpheus, the mortal musician whose skill was so divinely inspired it rivaled that of the gods themselves. His music was not mere entertainment, it was a tangible architectural force. When he played his lyre, the very rocks and trees were so captivated they would rearrange themselves to follow him, forming circles and groves as if they were a willing audience. Wild beasts would lay down their ferocity, their natural chaos soothed into harmony by his melodies. His most famous feat was his descent into the underworld, where he did not fight the guardians of death or bargain with Hades through words alone. He played his music, and the effect was instantaneous. The tormented souls of the dead ceased their sufferings to listen. The Furies, embodiments of vengeance, wept tears of black iron. Even the stern hearts of Hades and Persephone were softened, and they agreed to release his wife, Eurydice, back to the land of the living. Orpheus's music did not just describe emotion, it was emotion in its pure, formative state. It could build bridges between the world of the living and the dead, temporarily restructuring the very rules of reality through the sheer architectural power of harmony. His story is a testament to the belief that music is a residual creative force in the world, a divine tool that, when wielded by a master, allows a mortal to tap into the original sonic blueprints of the cosmos. This understanding of sound as a foundational, structuring force gave rise to some of humanity's most enduring spiritual technologies. The intricate practice of chanting mantras, for instance, is not about repeating empty phrases. It is the conscious use of specific sonic formulas, words and syllables believed to carry a particular vibrational architecture. By chanting a mantra like Om, a practitioner is not just praying, they are attempting to tune their own consciousness to the fundamental frequency of the universe to align their individual being with the cosmic design. It is an act of personal reharmonization, a way to deconstruct the noise of the ego and rebuild a state of inner peace and connection. Similarly, the sacred songs and chants of countless cultures, from the Gregorian plainsong of Christian monks to the resonant throat singing of Tibetan Buddhists, are designed to do more than just praise. Their specific tonalities, rhythms, and harmonies are carefully crafted to alter brainwave patterns, induce states of deep meditation, and facilitate healing. This is the practical application of the god's sonic architecture, a way to use deliberately structured sound to repair, realign, and elevate the human spirit, proving that the original divine vibration is not just out there in the cosmos, but is a power we can access and use to rebuild ourselves from the inside out. Yet after building monuments of stone and engineering the very laws of nature, the divine architects revealed their mastery over a far more elusive medium, the fabric of perception itself. They began to construct illusions and miracles not as mere tricks, but as sophisticated architectural projects designed to reshape reality according to a higher purpose. This was not about deception for its own sake, but about using the veil of Maya, the cosmic illusion, as a precise tool to protect the innocent, test the faithful, and reveal profound truths that the naked mind could not otherwise bear. In this breathtaking divine endeavor, the line between what is real and what is perceived becomes the final frontier of creation, a canvas upon which the gods paint lessons that resonate through the ages. We see this principle enacted with beautiful complexity in the stories of the Hindu god Krishna. His entire life is a play of divine illusion, a performance designed to convey the deepest mysteries of existence. In one of the most famous episodes from the Mahabharata, the great warrior Arjuna finds himself paralyzed with despair on the battlefield, unwilling to fight his own kin. To shake him from his moral confusion, Krishna, serving as his charioteer, grants him a divine vision, not a gentle dream, but a devastating unveiling. He reveals his true, universal form, the Vishvarupa. This is not a simple change of appearance, it is an architectural feat of cosmic scale. Arjuna sees infinite mouths and eyes, the entire universe contained within the god's body, all time and space unfolding at once, with all the warriors on the battlefield already drawn into its terrifying maw. This illusion, or miracle, is far more real than the ordinary reality Arjuna knew. It is a truth so overwhelming that it shatters his ordinary perception, forcing him to understand that the soul is eternal and his earthly duty is part of a divine plan far greater than his personal grief. Krishna uses this monumental illusion not to confuse but to clarify, not to hide the truth but to reveal it in its most raw and undeniable form, teaching that what we perceive with our limited senses is but a shadow of the ultimate reality. A world away, in the misty glens and ancient forests of Celtic mythology, a different kind of illusory architecture emerges, one woven from enchantment and fey magic. The tales of the Tuatha De Danann and other fairy folk are filled with glamour spells that cast a perceptual veil over people, places, and objects. A crumbling, damp barrow mound might appear to mortal eyes as a glittering palace filled with feasting nobles and untold wealth. A handful of dried leaves could be transformed into golden coins, only to revert to their true form once the enchantment lifts or the human breaks the fairy rules. This fairy glamour is a defensive and territorial architecture, a way for these otherworldly beings to hide their true nature and their realms from human interference, or to lure the unwary into their service. But these illusions also carry a profound philosophical warning. They teach that the world is not always as it seems, that perception is fragile and can be manipulated, and that trusting solely in the evidence of your senses is a dangerous game. The glamour challenges the very idea of a single, objective reality, suggesting that multiple layers of existence can occupy the same space, visible only to those with the sight to see beyond the surface. This divine and fey artistry with illusion speaks directly to some of the most enduring questions in human thought. It delves into the ancient philosophical debate between appearance and reality, a theme that preoccupied thinkers from Plato, who described our world as shadows on a cave wall, to modern neuroscientists studying how the brain constructs its own model of reality from flawed sensory data. The gods' use of Maya mirrors our own psychological experience. Our minds are constant architects of illusion, filling in blind spots, creating narratives to make sense of chaos, and often seeing what we expect or desire to see rather than what is actually there. This makes the mythological theme painfully relevant. In an age of deepfakes, curated social media realities, and political spin, the ancient stories about divine illusions become vital cautionary tales. They remind us to cultivate discernment, to question the surface appearance of things, and to seek a deeper, more enduring truth beneath the ever-shifting glamours of the world. The miracles and illusions of the gods were ultimately masterclasses in critical thinking and faith, designed not to blind us but to give us the sight to see. But even the most brilliantly designed creation requires protection. A perfect world left unguarded is vulnerable to corruption, theft, or simple neglect. Recognizing this, the divine architects embarked on a critical project of security and stewardship, the creation of dedicated guardians and protectors. These were not mere sentries but specialized beings, custom-designed with the singular purpose of defending the most sacred and powerful elements of the cosmos. They became the living security system of the divine plan, the eternal watchmen posted at the thresholds of treasure, knowledge, and life itself. Consider the magnificent, fearsome dragon Ladon from Greek mythology. This was no random beast lurking in a cave. It was a purpose-built marvel of biological engineering, tasked with one of the most important jobs in the divine realm. In the far western garden of the Hesperides grew a tree that bore golden apples, a gift from the earth goddess Gaia to the queen of the gods, Hera. These apples were not just precious metal, they were the very source of immortality for the Olympian gods, the core of their eternal power. To protect this ultimate treasure, the gods commissioned a guardian of unparalleled capability. Ladon was a dragon like no other, 100 heads, each with its own venomous tongue and razor-sharp mind, and it never, ever slept. It coiled itself around the tree's trunk, a living, breathing fortress wall that could see and strike in every direction simultaneously. Its presence transformed the idyllic garden into an impregnable vault. The hero Heracles, in his 11th labor, would eventually best Ladon, but the sheer effort and divine assistance required underscored the effectiveness of this living architectural feat. Ladon was more than a monster, it was a perfect security solution, a being whose entire existence was a declaration that some things are too precious to be left unguarded. This principle of divine protection finds a powerful and enduring expression in the foundational texts of Christianity. After Adam and Eve are exiled from the Garden of Eden, God does not simply abandon the place or let nature reclaim it. He takes a specific and dramatic measure to protect its most sacred artifact. He stations cherubim at the eastern entrance, along with a flaming sword that turned in every direction, to guard the way to the tree of life. It's a crucial detail often overshadowed by the expulsion itself. The cherubim are not the chubby, playful infants of later Renaissance art. In ancient Near Eastern tradition, they were formidable, awe-inspiring hybrid creatures, often depicted with the bodies of lions, the wings of eagles, and the faces of humans, symbols of immense power and vigilance. Their placement is a permanent, active measure. It's not a punishment for humanity, but a necessary act of containment. The tree of life represented the potential for eternal existence in a state of separation from God, a fate considered worse than mortal life. By guarding it, God was architecting a boundary of grace, protecting humanity from an immortality of brokenness, and protecting the sanctity of the divine plan itself. The guardian was not an afterthought, it was an essential part of the creation's moral architecture. On a deeper level, these mythic guardians are powerful, multi-layered symbols. They physically represent the universal need for boundaries and security in any complex system. Just as a castle has its walls and a vault has its lock, the cosmos has its dragon and its angelic host. They embody the virtues of unwavering loyalty and absolute duty, performing their function without question or fatigue for all eternity. But they also represent the concept of a trial. A guardian is not just an obstacle, it is a test. The hero who seeks the guarded treasure must prove their worth, their cleverness, or their purity of heart to pass. The guardian separates the worthy from the unworthy, ensuring that divine power or knowledge does not fall into the wrong hands. This idea resonated so powerfully that it flowed directly from mythology into the folklore of virtually every culture on Earth. We see it in the troll under the bridge demanding a toll, in the fire-breathing serpent guarding a hoard of gold in a Norse saga, and in the magical creatures protecting enchanted glades in Celtic tales. These stories taught that things of great value are never easily obtained, and that true worth is often measured by one's ability to overcome the challenges placed in their path by a protective, discerning intelligence. The divine architects in building their guardians were not just protecting their treasures, they were building the very tests that would create the heroes worthy of them. But if the gods could craft illusions to reshape a single reality, what happens when their architectural ambitions expand beyond the boundaries of a single universe? What if the ultimate creative act was not the construction of one world, but the simultaneous engineering of many? This brings us to one of the most mind-bending and expansive of all divine projects, the building of parallel worlds and dimensions. Far from being satisfied with a single cosmic blueprint, the divine architects in numerous traditions are described as having drafted multiple plans, constructing entire realities that exist alongside our own, each operating under its own unique set of physical and metaphysical laws. This isn't just world building, it's multiverse engineering, a concept that reveals a staggering scope to divine creativity, and one that feels startlingly relevant to our modern scientific inquiries. Perhaps the most beautifully structured model of a multidimensional cosmos comes from the cold, heroic North. Norse mythology presents us with a universe that is not a single, lonely sphere in space, but a vibrant, interconnected community of realms. This is the cosmology of the 9 worlds, all nestled within the towering branches and among the deep roots of Yggdrasil, the immense world tree. This is not a metaphor. Yggdrasil is the literal, physical infrastructure of the multiverse, its trunk the central axis, its roots drilling down into the wells of fate and wisdom, and its branches cradling the homes of gods, humans, and giants alike. Each world is a distinct dimension with its own nature and inhabitants. There's Midgard, the walled middle garden of humanity. There's Asgard, the soaring, fortified home of the Aesir gods. There's Jotunheim, the harsh, wild land of the giants, and Svartalfheim, the cavernous home of the dwarves. Further down, we find Helheim, the cold, misty realm of those who did not die in battle. This system is a masterwork of divine architectural zoning, a carefully planned cosmic neighborhood where different types of beings, divine, human, elemental, and monstrous, coexist within a single, living framework, connected by the Rainbow Bridge Bifrost and the tangled roots of the tree itself. Yggdrasil is the ultimate symbol of a connected multiverse, a living, breathing reminder that our reality is just one apartment in a vast, divine arboreal complex. This concept of layered realities finds its most prolific and philosophical expression in the ancient texts of Hinduism. Here, the scale of divine architecture becomes almost incomprehensible. The universe we inhabit is just one of countless universes or lokas, all flowing in and out of existence in vast cycles of creation and dissolution overseen by the god Brahma. These lokas are not just different planets, they are entirely different dimensional planes of existence, each with its own vibrational frequency and state of consciousness. Some are gross material realms like our own, others are subtle astral planes, and still others are purely spiritual domains. The Vedas describe 14 primary lokas, 7 ascending higher and 7 descending lower, with Earth situated roughly in the middle. But this is just the beginning. The cosmology speaks of innumerable Brahmandas, or cosmic eggs, each a self-contained universe with its own Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, its own laws of physics and its own timeline. These universes are said to manifest like bubbles in an infinite ocean, existing for a time before dissolving back into the divine source, only for new ones to form again. This is not a static creation but a dynamic, breathing, pulsing multiverse on a scale that defies human imagination, all emanating from and sustained by the ultimate reality of Brahman. The divine architect here is less a builder and more a conscious, infinite energy field perpetually dreaming an infinite number of dreams into being. This ancient, mythic insistence on a multidimensional reality does far more than just make for fascinating stories. It actively cultivates a radical open-mindedness about the nature of existence itself. These narratives were the first thought experiments, challenging the simplistic notion that what we can see and touch is all there is. They taught that reality has layers, that other worlds with other rules could be just a spiritual vibration or a branch of the world tree away. This philosophical foundation laid the groundwork for a mindset that could eventually entertain the most speculative ideas in modern theoretical physics. The current scientific hypothesis of the multiverse, the idea that our universe is just one of a potentially infinite number of universes in a grand multiverse, feels less like a radical, new idea and more like a modern, mathematical retelling of these ancient intuitions. When a physicist talks about the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, where every possible outcome of an event spawns a new, branching universe, they are architecting a model that echoes the Norse 9 worlds. When cosmology discusses bubble universes inflating within a larger cosmic foam, each with different fundamental constants, the language is eerily similar to the Hindu concept of Brahmandas bubbling up in the ocean of existence. The divine architects of myth, in their boundless creativity, seem to have blueprinted a possibility that science is only now beginning to map with equations. They encourage us to look at the night sky not as a ceiling but as a window, one of countless windows in an impossibly vast, divinely constructed mansion of realities, forever expanding the scope of what we believe is possible. Yet after designing the very walls of reality and the guardians to protect them, the divine architects faced their most profound logistical challenge: sustainability. A creation that is perfect and static is also a creation that is fragile, stagnant, and ultimately doomed. The solution was a stroke of genius that moved beyond linear construction into the realm of dynamic process. They architected time itself not as a straight line, but as a great turning wheel, engineering cycles of creation, destruction, and rebirth right into the operating system of the cosmos. This was not a flaw or an admission of failure. It was the ultimate feature, a built-in mechanism for renewal, evolution, and resilience that ensured their masterpiece could adapt, learn, and endure across eons. They designed the universe with a self-cleaning, self-improving function, understanding that true permanence is found not in stasis, but in the constant, sacred rhythm of return. Nowhere is this concept more elaborately detailed than in the vast cosmological vision of ancient India. Hindu philosophy presents time not as an arrow flying towards a single conclusion, but as a series of nested, rotating wheels within wheels. The largest of these cycles is the Mahayuga, a single, great age lasting 4.32 million years. This Mahayuga is itself divided into 4 smaller yugas, or epochs, each one decreasing in spiritual vitality and moral order, like a coin slowly losing its imprint. It begins with the Satya Yuga, a golden age of truth and perfection where humanity lives in harmony with the divine, and gradually descends through the Treta and Dvapara yugas into the Kali Yuga, the age we currently inhabit, an era of conflict, ignorance, and spiritual decay. But this descent is not the end of the story. It is merely the downward arc of the cycle. When the Kali Yuga concludes, the entire cosmos undergoes a pralaya, a great dissolution where the universe is reabsorbed into its divine source. This is not a punishment, it is a necessary rest, a cosmic reset. After a period of quiescence, the cycle begins again with a new Satya Yuga, fresh and pristine. This grand architecture suggests that decay is a natural and necessary phase, a clearing of the slate that makes way for a new and often improved iteration of creation. It's a philosophy that finds profound beauty in impermanence, teaching that endings are not final, but are simply the prelude to another beginning. A world away, on the other side of the globe, the Aztec civilization developed a similarly powerful but far more visceral and urgent vision of cyclical time. Theirs was a cosmos of immense creative power balanced by terrifying fragility. According to their myths, we do not live in the first world, but the fifth. Each previous world, or sun, was governed by a different deity and inhabited by a different race of beings, and each was destroyed by a cataclysm related to its ruling force. The first sun, Nahui Oslotl, was dominated by the earth and destroyed by jaguars. The second, Nahui Ehekatl, was ruled by air and torn apart by great hurricanes. The third, Nahui Quiahuatl, was a world of fire and was consumed by a rain of lava, while the fourth, Nahui Atl, was a water world ended by a global flood. Our current era, Nahui Olan, the age of movement, is governed by the sun god Tanatia. Its defining characteristic is its instability. It is destined to be destroyed by earthquakes. This relentless cycle of collapse was not seen as a hopeless fate, but as a divine process of trial and error. Each new sun was an attempt to build a better, more stable world than the last. The destruction of the previous four worlds was not meaningless annihilation, but a necessary pruning of flawed designs, making space for a new experiment in existence. This placed a tremendous responsibility on humanity. The Aztecs believed the sun god Tonatiuh required constant nourishment, the sacred energy of Tonali, offered through ritual and, in their belief, sacrifice to continue his journey across the sky. Human action was literally the fuel that maintained the current cycle, postponing the inevitable earthquakes and sustaining the world for another day. This created a society deeply aware of its role in a vast, precarious, and cyclical cosmic order. This ancient architectural view of time as a wheel rather than a line offers a powerful and enduring framework for understanding our place in the universe. It provides a narrative that can absorb trauma and loss, reframing them not as unique catastrophes but as part of a larger, regenerative pattern. In a linear view of history, an ending is a tragedy, a final failure. But in a cyclical view, an ending is a transformation, a necessary death that precedes a rebirth. This philosophy is echoed in the natural world all around us in the way a forest fire clears the way for new growth, in the way winter's barren silence gives birth to spring's explosion of life. Today, this ancient wisdom is finding new resonance in our modern struggles. The growing field of ecological restoration operates on a cyclical principle, understanding that ecosystems have an inherent ability to heal and renew themselves if given the chance, and that sometimes a managed intervention, like a controlled burn, is necessary to catalyze that rebirth. Similarly, in the realm of personal spirituality and psychology, the concept of cyclical renewal is central to healing. The process of breaking down old, unhealthy patterns, a personal pralaya, is seen as essential for building a stronger, more authentic self. The divine architects, in building these great cycles into the fabric of reality, gave us a template for resilience. They taught us that collapse is not the opposite of creation, but its partner. That to build something new, something better, we must sometimes have the courage to let the old structures fall, trusting in the timeless, turning wheel that guarantees the dawn will always follow the darkest night. Yet after designing the cosmos and all within it, the divine architects turned their focus inward to the most complex and dynamic structure of all, their own society. The gods themselves, in culture after culture, were not a random collection of powerful beings. They were organized into meticulously designed pantheons, intricate social architectures that mirrored, and indeed, provided the original blueprint for every human system of governance, family, and community. This was the ultimate act of self-organization, a divine modeling of how a complex society of powerful individuals could function, compete, and cooperate. The pantheon is not just a list of deities, it is a detailed organizational chart for the universe, a masterclass in the political and psychological structures that hold a civilization together. Consider the magnificent and famously dysfunctional family on Mount Olympus. The Greek pantheon, led by Zeus, is a breathtaking case study in divine political architecture. This is not a loose affiliation of spirits. It is a structured monarchy with a clear hierarchy, a royal court, and a precise division of labor. Zeus sits at the head as king, the ultimate executive authority who enforces oaths and maintains order. But his power is not absolute in a tyrannical sense. He presides over a council of 12 major Olympians, each a specialist with a clearly defined portfolio. Hera is the queen and goddess of marriage. Poseidon commands the seas. Demeter oversees the harvest. Athena brings wisdom and strategic warfare, and so on. This is a divine cabinet, a system of checks and balances where the ambitions of one god are tempered by the domains and powers of the others. Their constant squabbles, their alliances, their betrayals, and their reconciliations are not just entertaining drama. They are a divine reflection of the political machinations, diplomatic negotiations, and power struggles inherent in any human government, from a Bronze Age kingdom to a modern senate. The Greeks looked at their own fractious city-states and saw them mirrored in the divine society above, understanding that order is not the absence of conflict, but the successful management of it within an agreed-upon structure. A world away, in the vibrant spiritual traditions of the Yoruba people of West Africa, we find a different but equally sophisticated model of divine social architecture. The Orishas are not a single family ruling from a remote mountain, but a vast community of divine forces, each embodying a specific aspect of nature, human endeavor, or moral principle. There is a profound sense of balance and interdependence in this system. Oshun, the Orisha of love, beauty, and fresh water, offers her sweetness and diplomacy. Ogun, the Orisha of iron, war, and technology, provides the strength, determination, and tools to clear paths and defend the community. Shango, the king and Orisha of thunder and justice, brings the power of righteous authority. These forces are not isolated, they work in concert, and a person might call upon different Orishas at different times in their life, depending on their need. This pantheon is less a centralized government and more a model of a holistic, interconnected community where every individual, every skill, and every natural force has a vital role to play. The relationship between a devotee and their guiding Orisha is deeply personal, a mentorship that provides guidance, protection, and a sense of identity. This system architects a society where power is distributed, where every member is valued for their unique contribution, and where the divine is intimately involved in the daily, practical struggles and joys of human life. These divine social structures provided ancient humanity with something utterly indispensable, a template. Before Plato wrote his Republic theorizing about the ideal state, people were looking to the gods to understand how to organize themselves. The Greek model, with its strong, if sometimes flawed, king and its specialized council, provided a justification for monarchy and a complex class of priests and officials, each serving a specific function in the state, much like Athena had her temples and priests and Poseidon his. The Yoruba model, with its community of interdependent specialists, reinforces the values of communal living, respect for diverse skills, and the importance of every individual finding their rightful place and purpose within the larger whole. These myths were the first political science textbooks, using the engrossing dramas of the gods to explore fundamental questions about power. Where does legitimate authority come from? How is it best distributed? How does a society balance the needs of the individual with the needs of the group? How do we resolve conflict? The pantheons offered a range of answers, showing that there is no single perfect system, but that the principles of structure, role definition, and mutual obligation are universal necessities. They taught that whether in a heavenly court or a village council, a functioning society requires a designed architecture of relationships, a divine lesson we are still learning and relearning today. This profound connection between myth and the land itself represents one of the most intimate and enduring projects of the divine architects. After building the grand structures of society and the cosmos, they turned their creative force to the very ground beneath our feet, shaping the earth not as a blank canvas, but as a living, breathing storybook written in stone, water, and soil. This is the creation of symbolic landscapes, where every mountain, river, and valley is not a random geological accident, but a deliberate, sacred monument, a permanent inscription of a divine narrative onto the physical world. The gods were not just building a planet, they were composing an epic poem in the language of geography, ensuring their stories would be remembered not only in songs told around a fire, but in the very terrain we walk upon every day. We see this powerful principle at work in the fiery, creative journey of the Hawaiian goddess Pele. She is not a distant deity who shaped the islands from afar and then retired. Her story is the geography. As the goddess of volcanoes and fire, her travels across the Pacific are literally mapped by the Hawaiian archipelago itself. The myths tell of her fleeing her older sister, the sea goddess Namakea, whose waves would quench Pele's creative fires. Wherever Pele would stop and attempt to dig a pit for a new home, her fire would burst forth, building a new island. But her sister's relentless waves would eventually force her to flee further east. This dramatic sibling rivalry is the geological history of the island chain, with the islands growing younger and more volcanically active as you move southeast, exactly tracing Pele's flight. The Big Island of Hawaii, with its violently active Kilauea volcano, is her current home, the latest and most dramatic chapter in her ongoing story. The island is not just where Pele lives, it is Pele. The lava flows are her body and her blood, the steam vents her breath, the explosive eruptions her passionate and volatile temperament. This transforms a volcanic landscape from a potentially terrifying and destructive force into a deeply personal and sacred narrative. To stand on the black sand beaches of Hawaii is to stand on the physical evidence of a goddess's struggle, creativity, and power, making the connection to the divine immediate, tangible, and unforgettable. This practice of inscribing story directly into the land finds its most comprehensive and ancient expression in the Aboriginal Australian concept of the dreaming or dreamtime. This is not a history that happened long ago, but an eternal, ongoing reality that exists parallel to our own, a dimension where the ancestral beings walked the formless earth and sang the world into existence. Their epic journeys are not just tales, they are the literal blueprints for the Australian continent. Every significant landscape feature is a monument to a specific event in the dreaming. That unusual rock formation is not just weathered stone, it is the fossilized body of the rainbow serpent who carved out the riverbeds as she moved across the land. That particular waterhole is not just a source of water, it is the exact spot where an ancestral kangaroo stopped to drink, and its essence became part of the place. These are not metaphors to Aboriginal people, they are statements of fact. The land and the story are one and the same. This knowledge is preserved and passed down through intricate songlines, paths that crisscross the continent where every hill, every tree, every water source corresponds to a specific verse in a song. To sing the song is to navigate the land, and to walk the land is to sing the song into being anew, actively participating in the continuous creation of the world. This is geography as a living, sung scripture, a sacred duty of remembrance that binds the people to their country in an unbreakable covenant of identity and care. This divine architectural project of turning landscape into narrative has had a profound and increasingly urgent impact on our modern world, particularly in the realms of conservation and cultural understanding. When a forest is not merely a collection of trees but the sacred hunting grounds of an ancestral hero, its value transcends lumber and resources. It becomes a chapter in a holy book that cannot be reprinted. This worldview fosters a deep, inherent ethic of environmental stewardship, For the Aboriginal peoples, to harm the land is to desecrate a sacred text, to sever the songline, and to risk the very stability of the world that the ancestors sang into being. This offers a powerful alternative to purely economic or even scientific arguments for conservation, grounding the need to protect the environment in a framework of spiritual necessity and profound respect. Furthermore, this symbolic geography has given rise to the meaningful practice of cultural tourism, where travelers seek not just to see a landscape but to understand its story. Visitors to Hawaii can learn the myth of Peel before witnessing the awe-inspiring lava flows, transforming a sightseeing trip into a profound cultural and spiritual experience. Tourists in Australia can, with permission and guidance, learn snippets of a songline, allowing them to walk through the outback not as outsiders in a hostile environment, but as guests in a living museum, reading the ancient stories written in the contours of the land. This encourages a form of travel that is based on connection and respect rather than mere consumption, where the destination is appreciated not just for its beauty but for its soul. The divine architects, in weaving their stories into the very fabric of the earth, gave humanity a permanent invitation to look deeper, to listen more closely, and to understand that every place we live in or visit is not just a location on a map, but a page in an immense divine story waiting to be read. Yet after mapping the heavens and structuring societies, the divine architects confronted their most intimate and complex design challenge, the chaotic landscape of the human heart itself. They turned their focus inward to the very essence of what it means to be human, and began the meticulous work of engineering our emotions, virtues, and flaws. This was not about building with stone or law, but with the intangible stuff of consciousness, weaving an intricate tapestry of feeling and impulse into the core of our being. The gods were no longer just shaping the world we live in. They were shaping the very lens through which we experience it, architecting the psychological framework that would define the human condition in all its beautiful, painful complexity. Perhaps the most famous and poignant story of this divine psychological engineering comes from the Greeks, with the myth of Pandora. Created by Hephaestus at the command of Zeus, Pandora was herself a masterpiece of divine craftsmanship, the first woman, endowed with gifts from all the gods. But her story is really about a container, a great jar often mistranslated as a box. Zeus gave this jar to Pandora with a single, stern command, never to open it. Yet, driven by a divinely instilled curiosity, she eventually lifted the lid. In that moment, she did not simply release a few bad things, she unleashed the entire architecture of human suffering. Out flew a swarm of miseries, sickness, toil, envy, hatred, and despair, every conceivable form of emotional and physical pain. This was not a random assortment of evils. It was a carefully curated collection of the psychological burdens that would forever define mortal life. But the myth reveals a stunning nuance in its divine design. As the last entity to remain trapped under the lid, Pandora found not another horror but Elpis, most commonly translated as hope. This dual release is a profound piece of psychological architecture. The gods did not simply curse humanity with suffering, they built into the system its own counterbalance. Hope is the mechanism that allows us to endure the very sufferings released from the same jar. It is the divine gift of resilience, the engineered capacity to see light in the darkness and to continue striving even in the face of immense pain. The myth suggests that our emotional world is a carefully balanced system, where the weight of sorrow is intentionally offset by the lifting power of hope, a masterstroke of psychological engineering from the very first designers. This concept of a built-in emotional and moral framework finds a more systematic and philosophical expression in the ancient Hindu concept of the gunas. These are not gods or stories, but rather three fundamental qualities or tendencies that are woven into the very fabric of creation, and by extension, into every human personality. The gunas represent the ultimate divine blueprint for the human psyche. Sattva is the quality of purity, wisdom, harmony, and lightness. It is the state of clarity and peace, the mental and emotional equivalent of a perfectly calm, sunlit lake. Rajas is the quality of passion, activity, desire, and restlessness. It is the driving force of ambition, motion, and dynamism, but also of attachment and agitation. Tamas is the quality of darkness, inertia, ignorance, and stagnation. It is the force of resistance, lethargy, and delusion that leads to inaction and decay. According to this philosophy, every single thought, emotion, and action we experience is a mixture of these three gunas, with one usually predominating at any given time. This is a breathtakingly comprehensive architectural model for the soul. It provides a complete diagnostic toolkit for understanding our own behavior. Why do we feel lethargic and resistant one day, Tamas, and driven and ambitious the next, Rajas? Why do we occasionally achieve states of serene, selfless clarity, Sattva? The gunas explain it all not as random mood swings, but as the dynamic interplay of three fundamental currents flowing through our consciousness, placed there by the original architects of reality. The entire goal of spiritual practice within this system, through yoga, meditation, and ethical living, is to consciously cultivate sattva and reduce rajas and tamas, to actively participate in refining the divine design within ourselves. It is the ultimate act of collaboration with the architects. We are given the raw materials of our personality, and our life's work is to build something beautiful with them. This divine foray into psychological architecture does far more than just explain why we feel what we feel. It provides an essential bridge between the ancient world of myth and the modern science of the mind. These stories and philosophies represent humanity's first brave forays into psychology. Long before the field had a name, they are attempts to create a map for the unmappable territories of the inner self. When Pandora's jar releases its contents, it is a mythological way of describing the moment we become aware of our own complex emotional spectrum. The gunas provide a sophisticated vocabulary for discussing mental states that we still use today, even if we call them by different names. What a therapist might identify as depression shares characteristics with the heaviness of tamas. The anxious drive of a workaholic mirrors the agitated energy of rajas. The mindful peace achieved in meditation is the modern pursuit of a sattvic state. These ancient models validate the entire human experience, suggesting that our struggles with negative emotions are not personal failings, but part of a universal, pre-installed design. They remove the stigma and replace it with understanding, offering a framework for self-improvement that is thousands of years old. The gods, in designing our inner world with such intention, gave us the first key to understanding ourselves, inviting us to see our own minds not as chaotic voids, but as intricate and purposeful creations, worthy of a lifetime of exploration and awe. Throughout this extraordinary journey, we have ventured across continents and through millennia, uncovering a truth far more profound than simple tales of powerful beings. We have witnessed the first gods not as distant rulers to be feared, but as the ultimate master builders, the original architects of reality itself. From the cosmic engineering of Marduk fashioning the heavens from the body of Tiamat, to the psychological craftsmanship of the Greek gods releasing both suffering and hope from Pandora's jar, these divine figures were engaged in a breathtaking array of projects. They laid the foundations of the cosmos, drafted the blueprints for human society, and even engineered the very fabric of our emotions, constructing a universe rich with intention, order, and meaning. This architectural view transforms mythology from a collection of fanciful stories into a sacred library of design principles left behind by the first great visionaries. The enduring power of these mythological blueprints is that they are not relics of a forgotten past. They are active, living frameworks that continue to shape our world in ways both visible and invisible. The scientist peering through a telescope, searching for the fundamental laws of the universe, is walking a path first laid out by gods who engineered natural order from chaos. The urban planner designing a city with green spaces and communal areas is echoing the divine aspiration for harmonious societies, much like the idealized cities of Aloka or Eridu. The artist struggling to capture a fleeting emotion on a canvas or the musician composing a symphony is tapping into that same creative impulse that first stirred the void, attempting to build something beautiful from nothing. Even our personal quests for purpose, our desire to build a meaningful life and contribute to our community, are modern reflections of that primordial drive to participate in the grand design. These ancient stories remind us that our urge to create, to organize, and to find beauty is not a mere biological impulse, but an echo of the divine, a shared inheritance from the original architects. So as we close this chapter, I invite you to look at the world around you with new eyes. See the architecture of your own life not as a series of random events, but as a project you are actively building. What kind of structures are you raising with your words and actions? What blueprints are you following? The myths teach us that creation is an ongoing process, and each of us holds the tools to contribute to it. Whether you are crafting a story, building a business, nurturing a family, or simply striving to leave a corner of the world better than you found it, you are participating in that ancient, sacred tradition. You are honoring the first architects by embracing your own creative power. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of the wonders of mythology. I am endlessly curious to hear which of these divine projects resonated most deeply with you, so please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey, subscribe to the channel for more adventures into the stories that shape us. May your own creations, great and small, be ever inspired by the divine spark of the